So today, I'm going to talk about a 5-year-old entry-level mirrorless camera. Let's go. So, here in my hands is the Fujifilm X-A3. And like I said, this was released in 2017, so it's about 5 years old at this point. And you might be wondering, hey Christian, why do you have this? Well, let me tell you a little story. A while back, I was watching a video from one of my favorite photography YouTubers, Omar Gonzalez Photography. And in one of his videos, he was talking about how he got his hands on an XE2 and how he just really enjoyed using an older camera, an older sensor, and how it just has a different feeling compared to more modern cameras. And that made me curious because I don't know anything about older cameras and older sensors. So I know one of my friends has an older camera, and this right here. And so I asked her if I can borrow it, and here it is. So I know this is not an older X-Trans system compared to Omar's XE2. This is actually an old Bayer sensor. And to be honest, I don't know the difference. I don't know anything about the Bayer sensor versus X-Trans sensor and what the difference is between them. Because when I entered photography, I pretty much jumped into an X-T30 and X100V, which are more modern X-Trans sensors. And because of that, I might be comparing this camera a lot to the X-T30 and X100V, just because, you know, that's basically my benchmark. That's what I know, and that's what I kind of really understand what it's like. But anyway, let me talk about this camera specifically. The first thing I want to talk about are probably the negatives, the things I didn't like personally. And the first thing that I noticed was the top of the camera, which is the PASM dial. And for me, I just personally don't like the PASM dial just because how I learned photography, I learned through something like this, where there's a specific dial for the main, what's it called, the exposure triangle, ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. There's a specific, a dial for that. And for me, it's easy to understand. If I adjust this, I have to adjust that, and adjust this, adjust that. I know exactly which dial it is, whereas with this, I had to make those adjustments through this here, and I just could not grasp, that function, that idea. Maybe it's because I don't know, I'm stupid. Probably that's probably it. But I don't know. I just would rather have specific dials for each thing. The second thing that I didn't like about this was there was only, I guess, one custom profile. Whatever the profile, like, the film simulation plus highlights and shadow adjustments and all that stuff, white balance, there's only one that you can save. It's that. Whereas something like this, you've got 8 different profiles you can save, and you can easily switch between them. And I don't know, I would rather have just multiple, even if it's less than 8, just multiple profiles to have, just so I can easily switch to different styles, But that's probably just because this is entry level and it didn't want to confuse any newcomers even more so. So yeah, I can get it. I can understand. Another thing that I did not like is that there's no viewfinder. There's no viewfinder. It's literally just the digital screen. So I like to use viewfinder, even if I don't use it always. I like using it. I like just putting my eye up to it, and sometimes I use the optical, sometimes I use electronic viewfinder. But I like doing this every once in a while, especially if it's so bright outside, and if I have to use a screen, I have to kind of go like that to really see properly. And I don't know, I feel like having a viewfinder would help. So some positives about this camera. The first thing I want to talk about is actually the screen. I know I just talked about how I complained about having a huge screen just like this, but I actually like it for one feature, and that is the flip up screen, the selfie screen. And I know that I guess more serious photographers don't really like the selfie screen just because it's not needed. It's for vloggers, you know, those kind of people. But I feel like I like that feature, and you don't always have to use it. Even if your camera has it, you don't have to use it. But I like knowing that it's there. And if I ever need to take a selfie or a group photo, I can just pop up that screen and take the photo, you know, knowing that everyone's in frame, you know, assuming I don't use a cell phone to take the photo. So there's that. And another thing that I actually like about this camera is the fact that it did not perform as well as the X100V. So let me explain. When I was going around in, I guess, less than ideal lighting conditions, I know for a fact that the X100V can handle it, you know, fairly well, or good enough, even though it is, you know, a little bit darker. It's not exactly night, or it's not pitch black, but it is darker. And the X100V can handle it. But I noticed that this camera was struggling in those conditions, and because of that, I really had to adjust the settings and pretty much get it right then and there. And well, this next point might be a negative, but the raw photos on this, it just didn't have as many details to, I guess, to recover in the shadows and stuff. I feel like the camera couldn't really grasp all the details in those lower lit situations, whereas the X100V can, and you can really recover all those details that it just couldn't get through a JPEG, for example. But why I think that's actually a positive for this camera is because it forces you to really get it right in camera, where because the RAW isn't as great, you can't really, you know, save the RAW or save the photo through the RAW or whatever. You really have to learn how to get it right. And because of that, I feel like I started to treat this more like a film camera, where there are no do-overs, there are no, you know, post editing and stuff like that. It's just whatever you take at that moment, and that's that. And that kind of mentality, I feel like was really interesting for me to do, because I really enjoy that kind of process of film, where you really kind of have to slow down and kind of think about the situation and all of your settings and then take the photo. And it was a very, very interesting experience. So that might not be a great thing for people who want to really invest in this camera for like nice, easy to use, you know, type of camera, but that's just what I got out of this camera. And obviously, because I'm comparing it to something like this is like nowhere even close to this in terms of quality and function and, you know, details and stuff like that. But this is still really nice, and I was still able to, you know, in my opinion, take fairly decent photos. And especially once I learned how to use this effectively, in my opinion, like a film camera, I think the final images were really nice. So last point I want to talk about is, who is this for? And in my opinion, in this current day and age, 2022, late 2022, I feel like there are many other cameras that you can buy, especially if you want to, I guess, transition from smartphone photography to digital camera, or I guess a real camera. And there are many better options. And I don't want to like talk smack about this camera, because I think it's good. But I feel like if you want to actually get a camera with you know, video capabilities, selfie screen, all that stuff. But you do not want to actually invest a lot of money into, for example, one of the XE series, the XT, or XS10, things like that, the more expensive cameras, just because you don't know if you want to commit to it. Then, okay, then I would recommend this camera. And yeah, I would recommend that camera in that situation. But if you want to sort of really get into the hobby, then I would recommend something else. But if you're not sure if you want to really hop into this hobby and you don't want to spend that much money, then I would recommend the X-A3. And in my honest opinion, I would not pay more than $200 for this camera. Just because I feel like for over $200, you can easily get better cameras, really. I think the XE series, you can possibly find some for a little bit over 200, maybe 250-ish. But I think less than 200, so maybe 150 range, I would probably pay for this camera. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about this camera, how I enjoyed it, but it's a little different, really. So anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. I'm gonna talk to you later. See ya.